In the shadowed vaults of Virginia Beach's Association for Research and Enlightenment, a forgotten transcript lay buried for decades, sealed away after Edgar Cayce's death in 1945, dismissed by skeptics as the ravings of a trance-channeling mystic. But what if this suppressed reading, documented in 1939, unlocked the veiled mechanics of consciousness's final earthly tether? A revelation so profound it could unravel the illusions we cling to about mortality, whispered only in hidden circles, lest it upend our fragile grasp on reality. Edgar Cayce, the sleeping prophet of the early 20th century, was no ordinary seer. From his unassuming home in Virginia Beach, Virginia, between 1901 and 1945, he slipped into hypnotic trances over 14,000 times, his voice a conduit for insights that spanned health, history, and the unseen realms. Working alongside his devoted stenographer, Gladys Davis, Cayce transcribed visions that challenged the era's scientific dogma, prophecies of Atlantis, cures for the incurable, and glimpses into the soul's architecture. Yet, amid this vast archive, a subset of readings on death's threshold was quietly sidelined. Their implications too disruptive for a world still reeling from world wars and rationalist fervor, overlooked, not for lack of evidence, but for the existential tremor they induced. What if death wasn't oblivion, but a deliberate unveiling? At the heart of these concealed documents lies Cayce's core revelation, drawn from trance states that peeled back the curtain on the soul's immediate post-mortem odyssey. Contrary to the ethereal ascent peddled in spiritual lore, Cayce described no instant ascent to paradise. Instead, in the fragile hours following the body's surrender, consciousness lingers in a suspended limbo, a veiled interlude, as he termed it, during one 1927 session. This period, spanning the first 3 hours, unfolds not in chaos, but in layers of detachment, where the self confronts its own echoes. Cayce, eyes closed and breath steady in his Virginia Beach sanctuary, would murmur of an invisible filament, the silver cord, binding spirit to flesh. Rooted in ancient esoteric texts, yet validated through his psychic probes, this cord pulses with residual life force, anchoring awareness to the physical husk as the soul recalibrates for realms beyond. Fade into the quiet intensity of that 1939 reading, number 5749-14, where Gladys Davis's pencil raced across the page, capturing Cayce's unaltered words amid the humid coastal air. He spoke of the inaugural hour as a residual embrace, where consciousness hovers, untethered yet unwilling to sever. No blinding light awaits. Rather, a subtle disorientation grips the departing essence, as if awakening in a half-remembered dream. The body, now vessel emptied, becomes a mirror reflecting the incarnate journey, joys etched in warmth, regrets in fleeting shadows. This isn't the frantic montage of near-death tales, but a serene introspection, a psychic inventory of karmic threads woven through one lifetime. Cayce's visions painted it vividly. The soul, still shadowed by earthly gravity, sifts through motifs of connection and fracture, questioning not just what was lived, but what essence endures. As the second hour dawns, the narrative shifts like mist dispersing at sunrise. Cayce called this the unbinding, a phase of gradual emancipation. The silver cord thins, fraying under the pull of higher vibrations, allowing consciousness to drift toward unseen horizons. Here, the psychic's revelations deepen into profound reunion. Presences of departed kin materialize not as ghosts, but as resonant frequencies, a quote, _3, _harmonizing across the veil. In reading 2067-1 from 1939, Cayce elaborated on this ethereal convergence, where the newly freed awareness senses the emotional tapestries of those who preceded it, comforting waves from a mother's enduring love, or the unresolved ache of a sibling's unfinished bond. Yet, the true intrigue lies in the bridge to the living. Cayce insisted that during this window, the soul can imprint upon the hearts of the bereaved, not through apparitions or voices, but via an intuitive pulse, a quote four, that bypasses the senses. This forbidden insight finds echo in the archived testimony of Mrs. Sarah Henderson, whose husband's 1943 passing coincided with Cayce's active years. In a letter preserved in the ARE files, redacted for privacy until recent scholarly digs, she recounted an overwhelming proximity in those initial hours post-death. No words were exchanged, yet guidance flowed. A sudden knowing about hidden family heirlooms, a balm against grief's sharp edge. Cayce's framework explains it not as hallucination, but as deliberate outreach, a soul's last earthly whisper before full transcendence. Such accounts, scattered through the suppressed ledgers, fueled whispers among Cayce's inner circle, physicians and philosophers who debated late into the nights whether this challenged physics or affirmed it. Expanding from these psychic dispatches, Cayce's perspective weaves a psychological tapestry of death as symbolic rebirth, echoing archetypes buried in the collective unconscious. Consciousness, he envisioned, isn't a fragile spark extinguished at the heart's last beat, but an eternal navigator, forever reshaped by the friction of mortal trials. In his altered states, Cayce confronted the psyche's hidden strata, fears of annihilation giving way to the allure of infinite recurrence. This elevates death from terror to threshold, a philosophical forge where the self dissolves into broader awareness, prompting us to live with deliberate intention, attuned to the invisible currents that bind us all. The tension mounts in his words. If awareness persists so vividly in transition, what illusions of separation do we maintain in life? The mystic's gaze pierces the veil, inviting us to question the boundaries we dare not cross while breathing. Yet one layer remains unexplored in the standard retellings, a speculative extension drawn from Cayce's broader cosmology. In those waning moments of the third hour, as the silver cord fully severs, consciousness might briefly interface with the Akashic expanse, the universal repository of all souls' imprints. Imagine a fleeting merge, where individual memories cascade into collective wisdom, dissolving ego into a cosmic echo chamber. This alignment, inferred from his Atlantis readings, suggests death as not loss, but amplification, your essence rippling outward, influencing unborn destinies in ways we can scarcely fathom. And so, as the echoes of Cayce's trance fade into the archive's dust, one haunting query lingers. If the soul's first hours after death are this intricate dance of review and reconnection, what undiscovered truths about your own consciousness wait just beyond the fear? In the dim archives of Virginia Beach, buried under decades of dust and deliberate obscurity, lies a forbidden transcript from 1937, one that Edgar Cayce's own stenographer, Gladys Davis, hesitated to file away. This lost reading, number 254-68, whispers of a soul's defiant autonomy in the hour after death, a revelation so disruptive to conventional beliefs that it was reportedly sealed by those who feared its power. What if the veil between life and beyond isn't torn by divine decree but chosen in secret by the soul itself? To understand this hidden gem, we must first step back to the man at its center, Edgar Cayce, the sleeping prophet of the early 20th century. Don't want it, dear. Born in 1877 in rural Kentucky, Cayce discovered his extraordinary gift as a young man, a psychic ability triggered in trance states, allowing him to access vast reservoirs of hidden knowledge. From his modest headquarters in Virginia Beach, he conducted over 14,000 readings between 1901 and 1945, diagnosing ailments, foretelling events, and unveiling spiritual truths that challenged the era's rigid doctrines. Yet, much of his work on death and the afterlife was overlooked or suppressed, not by Cayce himself, but by associates wary of backlash from religious institutions and skeptical scientists. These transcripts, painstakingly recorded by Gladys Davis during his unconscious sessions, were meant to guide humanity toward enlightenment. Instead, they languished in the Association for Research and Enlightenment's vaults, their radical implications on consciousness deemed too volatile for public scrutiny until now. As we peel back these layers in our reconstructed exploration, drawing from the unfiltered essence of Cayce's trances, the core revelation emerges like a shadow detaching from the light. Imagine the moment of physical death not as an endpoint, but as the threshold to a profound inner tribunal. Cayce described in that suppressed 254-68 session how the third hour post-mortem marks the soul's pivotal selection period. Far from awaiting judgment by some distant deity, the consciousness awakens to its own spiritual ledger. Here, unbidden visions flood in. Access to the Akashic records, that ethereal book of life Cayce envisioned as an infinite repository of every soul's incarnations, every fleeting thought, every entangled relationship, every unresolved echo across time. This isn't a chaotic replay, but a laser-focused reckoning, where the soul sifts through patterns of growth and stagnation, weaving lessons into the fabric of its next evolution. Picture it cinematically. A luminous figure, adrift in a vast, starry archive, fingers tracing glowing threads of past lives, not in regret, but in calculated resolve. One soul, detailed in reading 294 to 189, hovered in this limbo after crossing over. It weighed reincarnation to settle ancient karmic knots against lingering as an ethereal mentor. A choice forged in that third hour, born of self-assessed progress and untapped service. No external force dictated the path. Agency remained absolute, transforming death from surrender into a deliberate pivot. From this intensity, the narrative shifts seamlessly into the soul's ensuing quote, _8, __a fluid expanse that could span earthly days or stretch into years, mirroring the depth of one's material ties. Cayce illuminated this in reading 1472-1, painting the borderland as a hazy intermediary realm, inches from our physical world, where attached souls, those ensnared by possessions, ambitions, or unhealed bonds, linger to shed their burdens. For the spiritually attuned, however, forged through lifetimes of meditation and selfless acts, the passage accelerates, propelling them into realms of crystalline clarity. This process deepens the existential riddle. How does our earthly striving echo into eternity? Cayce's visions probe the psyche's undercurrents, urging us to confront death not as oblivion, but as a mirror to our hidden selves. In lives dominated by fleeting gains, the adjustment drags, trapping consciousness in psychological echoes of loss and desire. Yet for those who've cultivated inner awareness, it unveils a profound interconnectedness, revealing the soul's eternal purpose amid cycles of incarnation. Relationships, once veiled in mystery, disclose their cosmic choreography. Lovers as ancient allies, adversaries as catalysts for growth. Consider the case of Sarah Henderson, preserved in the Association's archives, a poignant thread in this tapestry. When her husband passed in 1943, she felt his essence lingering, offering emotional solace and even pragmatic counsel. Seeking clarity, she turned to Cayce for a reading, 1472-2, which affirmed the communication as genuine, a bridge during his transitional haze, granting mutual peace across the divide. Philosophically, Cayce's insights twist the knife of intrigue. Death becomes a psychological forge, where suppressed truths about our fragmented selves rise unbidden. The soul, in this expanded vista from reading 3744-4, grasps its multidimensional identity, threads linking incarnations, illuminating why certain bonds persist through veils of time. Doctor. Wesley Ketchum, an early champion of Cayce's work, exemplifies this after his own passing. His Widow's Inquiry yielded reading 5756-4, disclosing how Ketchum's consciousness, now unbound, reflected on his soul's arc, from earthly healer to spectral guardian, perpetuating the mission of awakening others. Service, Cayce implied, transcends the grave, evolving into subtler currents that ripple through the living world. Yet amid these documented echoes, a speculative veil lifts further, one not spelled out in the original transcripts but resonant with Cayce's mystic cadence. What if, in the adjustment's depths, consciousness after death glimpses a hybrid state? Individuality preserved, yet subtly dissolving into a collective oversoul? Not erasure, but an intimate fusion where personal memories infuse the universal mind, allowing the departed to whisper innovations or healings to receptive dreamers below. A forbidden bridge where the afterlife seeds earthly evolution. As these suppressed visions fade into the ether, one question haunts. If Cayce's hidden archive proves the soul's journey is eternally self-directed, what unseen choices are you forging right now, on the cusp of your own unseen horizon? But here's something that will absolutely blow your mind about what Cayce discovered regarding consciousness after death. In reading 11,585, he revealed that during the adjustment period, souls can actually influence events in the physical world through what he called spiritual magnetism. Opening hook, dramatic pause, echoing voiceover with faint archival static. Imagine this. Deep in the sealed archives of Virginia Beach, a stenographer's hurried notes from 1935 lie buried. Transcripts from Edgar Cayce's deepest trance, visions so profound they were whispered to be cursed by those who guarded the faith of the era. What if the veil between worlds isn't torn by ghosts, but woven by invisible threads of will? Cayce, the sleeping prophet, unlocked it all only for his revelations to vanish into shadow, suppressed by skeptics and sanctuaries alike. This isn't folklore. It's a hidden key to what awaits beyond the final breath. Transition, soft fade of ocean waves against Virginia Beach shores, evoking early 20th century isolation. To understand the weight of these lost words, picture Edgar Cayce in the quiet hum of his Virginia Beach sanctuary, the 1920s and 30s unfolding around him like a dream he couldn't wake from. A humble photographer by trade, Cayce entered trance states that birthed over 14,000 readings, prophecies, healings, and glimpses into realms unseen. Yet amid the Great Depression's despair and the world's march toward war, his most intimate disclosures on death were sidelined, overlooked by historians chasing miracles over mysteries. Church leaders eyed him warily, labeling his visions heresy. Even his followers buried the rawest transcripts to shield them from ridicule. Gladys Davis, his devoted stenographer, captured every syllable in feverish shorthand. But these pages on the soul's silent reach, they slumbered in unmarked files, too disruptive to the tidy narrative of an afterlife as mere reward or judgment. Transition. Tense underscore builds, like pages turning in a forbidden ledger. At the heart of Cayce's concealed visions lies a core truth that redefines the boundary of existence. The departed aren't adrift in silence. They actively shape our world. Not through spectral chills or poltergeists, but via a subtle force, this spiritual magnetism draws people and moments into alignment, nurturing the unfinished journeys of the living. In one such buried account from 1934, Cayce detailed how Anna Campbell, freshly transitioned from her earthly form, orchestrated a chain of uncanny synchronicities. Her daughter, adrift in widowhood's fog, encountered the man who would become her anchor, guided not by chance but by her mother's enduring consciousness, ensuring karmic threads wove toward growth and renewal. These aren't whims, they're deliberate interventions, born from love's unbreakable tether across the divide. Deeper still, Cayce unveiled a layered cosmos of oversight, where souls ascend to form ethereal councils, guardians unseen, attuned to the pulse of incarnation. Drawing from reading 262 to 89, he described these advanced beings as architects of evolution, bound by cosmic laws that deliver precisely the trials and graces needed for a soul's ascent. No soul wanders alone. Higher entities convene in spectral assemblies, shielding and steering from the ether. Consider the file on young Tommy Henderson, a boy's brush, with oblivion in the ARE vaults. At 7, ravaged by illness, Tommy dreamed of his grandmother, gone just 2 years, whispering of roots and remedies from the other side. His mother's plea brought Cayce into trance, yielding reading 356-41, confirmation that her spirit wove through dreams, directing healers toward his bedside. Blended with Cayce's earthly counsel, it sparked a recovery that left physicians speechless, a testament to how transitioned consciousness collaborates with the living, mending fractures across dimensions in quiet harmony. Transition. Echoing whispers layer over a meditative hum, drawing into introspection. Yet Cayce's gaze pierced further, unraveling the psyche's fragile dance at death's threshold. In reading 1947-3, he illuminated those critical first 3 hours post-transition, not chaos, but a mirror held by the soul's earthly habits. For those steeped in meditation, prayer, or contemplative inquiry, death unfolds as a lucid voyage. Awareness intact, the spirit selects allies among fellow travelers, forging bridges of mutual aid that echo eternally. But for lives anchored in the tangible, devoid of inner seeking, confusion reigns, a disorienting haze demanding rescue from enlightened kin. Cayce implored preparation not as dread's antidote, but as life's quiet forge. Daily attunement builds an invisible momentum, easing the soul into vast horizons of perception. Death, in his eyes, morphs from abyss to threshold, a deliberate shift where fear, rooted in reading 136 to 18 as echoes of prior crossings, dissolves under understanding's light. This framework, consistent through decades of trances from the 1910s onward, paints mortality not as cessation, but as commencement, a soul's quiet review, selecting the next arena of wisdom. Cayce's voice, steady in the haze of sleep, insisted the process's innate benevolence, peaceful when met with openness, turbulent only through inherited shadows. Through service and stillness, we arm ourselves, enhancing not just this life's texture, but the seamless glide into what follows. Transition, subtle swell of ethereal chimes, inviting speculation. And here's a layer Cayce hinted at but never fully charted in those guarded sessions. What if, in death's embrace, consciousness doesn't merely persist? It fragments into a luminous archive where personal echoes merge with the collective unseen. Imagine souls, unburdened by flesh, sifting through Akashic whispers, glimpsing not just their own tapestry, but the interconnected fates of all. A speculative bridge where individual awareness blooms into universal empathy, forever altering how we mourn and remember. Closing. Voice lowers to a resonant hush. Screen fades to starlit void. In the end, Cayce's suppressed echoes challenge us. If death is no barrier to influence, what unseen hands might already be guiding yours? The transcripts wait, dust-laden and defiant. Dare you listen? Fade in. Dimly lit archive room, shadows dancing across dusty shelves lined with ancient file boxes. A single beam of light illuminates a faded manuscript. Ominous pulsating music underscores the narrator's voice, low and urgent. Narrator, VO, grave and conspiratorial. In the shadowed vaults of Virginia Beach, a secret slumbers, one man's visions of the veil between life and death, buried for decades. Edgar Cayce, the sleeping prophet, channeled truths that terrified the guardians of conventional wisdom. Suppressed transcripts from his trances reveal not just glimpses of the afterlife, but a blueprint for mastering the final breath. What if death isn't an end, but a door you can unlock while still alive? These forbidden readings, once locked away to avoid panic in a skeptical world, now whisper of hidden powers over consciousness itself. Smooth transition. Cut to sepia-toned footage of early 20th century Virginia Beach. Waves crashing against the shore, horse-drawn carriages rumbling by. Archival photos of Cayce in repose flicker across the screen. Narrator, VO, shifting to historical reverence. It was the early 1900s in Virginia Beach, Virginia, a sleepy coastal town where Edgar Cayce, a humble photographer turned reluctant psychic, entered profound altered states. From 1901 until his death in 1945, Cayce delivered over 14,000 readings while in self-induced trances, his voice dictating cosmic insights through stenographer Gladys Davis, who captured every word in hushed notebooks. But why were his revelations on death consigned to obscurity? In an era dominated by materialist science and rigid religious doctrines, Cayce's ideas of conscious dying threatened to upend the fear-laden narratives of mortality. These transcripts, housed in the locked archives of the Association for Research and Enlightenment, were overlooked, perhaps deliberately, lest they challenge the illusion that death is random chaos. Cayce himself warned that such knowledge demanded spiritual maturity. Mishandled, it could stir existential dread rather than enlightenment. Transition. Ethereal glow envelops a reenactment. Cayce lies still on a simple bed, eyes closed as Gladys Davis scribbles furiously. The camera lingers on her pen, scratching across paper, evoking the weight of unspoken secrets. Narrator. VO, building intrigue with rising intensity. At the heart of these hidden readings lies Cayce's core revelation. The soul can train for death like an athlete for a race, achieving lucidity in the transition. In Trance Reading 6023, Cayce unveiled quote _1, 0, _ esoteric exercises to sever consciousness from the body's grip while still incarnate. Through deep meditative detachment, one practices floating awareness free of fleshly anchors, forging a bridge to the beyond. This isn't mere relaxation, it's a deliberate rehearsal for the soul's departure. Cayce insisted that adept practitioners could harmonize with celestial guides, selecting the precise moment of exit, not through defiance of life, but in sacred alignment with universal rhythms. Imagine wielding such agency, Death as a chosen portal, not a thief in the night. Transition. Slow zoom into a flickering lantern, illuminating a yellow document stamped underscore underscore, quote underscore 11 underscore underscore soft. Haunting chimes signal a shift to personal testimony, blending third-person narrative with imagined first-person echoes from the past. Narrator. VO. Weaving psychological depth with quiet urgency. This forbidden knowledge finds vivid proof in the overlooked case of Sarah Mitchell, documented in reading 1523-7. A devoted student of Cayce's circle, Mrs. Mitchell battled a terminal affliction in the 1930s. Years of disciplined meditation had attuned her spirit. In her waning days, she grew serene, her mind a beacon amid fading vitality. To her family's awe, she predicted her passage, spending those final, luminous hours imparting wisdom to her lineage, her voice steady as she slipped away on the foretold dawn. Cayce framed this as the pinnacle of psychic evolution, transforming mortality's terror into a ritual of release where the ego dissolves not in oblivion, but in triumphant expansion. Yet herein lies the psychological rift. Cayce's visions probe deeper, questioning why humanity clings to the body as identity. In Western minds, untrained in these arts, death looms as annihilation, a void born of severed spiritual ties. Cayce's trances expose this as illusion. Through prayer, selfless acts, and contemplative immersion, one reclaims the eternal self, turning the grave into a gateway of rebirth. Transition. Montage of modern elements, sterile hospital corridors juxtaposed with ancient meditative poses, fading into a starry night sky over the ocean, symbolizing infinite consciousness. Narrator. Bye-bye. Oh, delving into philosophical layers with measured gravitas. Cayce's insights pierce the modern psyche, especially amid America's veiled dread of dying. Reading 5749-3 lays bare the cultural fracture. Severed from our divine essence by relentless worldly pursuits, we view existence as finite, death as erasure. Eastern sages long embraced dying's preparation, but Cayce forged a Western path, practical, visionary, merging American ingenuity with timeless esoterica. His exercises awaken latent faculties, easing not just the end but life's hidden burdens, the gnawing doubt of purpose, the isolation of unshared visions. In Suppressed Sessions, Cayce reflected on death's archetypes, the symbolic shedding of illusions, akin to a phoenix rising from inner ashes. This psychological alchemy invites us to confront the shadow self, integrating fears into a tapestry of cosmic continuity where consciousness endures beyond the heartbeat's echo. Transition. Subtle dissolve to an imagined Akashic vista, ethereal light streams through cosmic veils as the narrator's tone grows speculative, introspective. Narrator, VO. Introducing the new reflection with contemplative pause. Beyond the documented trances, one unspoken layer emerges from Cayce's visionary framework. In the immediate aftermath of death, the soul may commune with a collective memory field, akin to an eternal archive, where fragmented experiences from all lives converge. This speculative merging suggests consciousness doesn't merely persist. It evolves through shared resonance, glimpsing not just personal history, but the interwoven destinies of humanity, fostering a profound unity that dissolves all separation. Transition. Final swell of music, screen fades to black with lingering waves lapping at the shore, echoing eternity. Narrator, VO, closing with resonant challenge. As these lost echoes of Edgar Cayce resurface from Virginia Beach's guarded depths, they compel a haunting query. If death is but a conscious threshold we've forgotten how to cross, what hidden potentials lie dormant in your own soul, waiting to defy the final silence. These practices not only improve the quality of physical life, but also ensure a smooth, conscious transition at the time of death. The practical implications of these teachings are profound. Fade in. Dimly lit archive room. Shadows dancing from a single flickering bulb. The sound of rustling papers and a distant echoing whisper builds tension. Narrator. Voice low, urgent, as if confessing a secret. Imagine this. In the hidden chambers beneath the modest headquarters in Virginia Beach, Virginia, during the turbulent years of the early 20th century, a man slipped into trance after trance, his voice channeling truths that could shatter our understanding of existence. But what if those sessions, raw, unfiltered revelations about the soul's journey, were locked away, suppressed not by malice, but by a world too fragile to face them? This is the lost archive of Edgar Cayce, the sleeping prophet, whose visions pierced the veil of death itself. In smooth transition, cut to grainy black and white footage of 1920s Virginia Beach, waves crashing against the shore, intercut with sketches of ethereal figures emerging from mist. Cayce wasn't born a mystic. He was a simple photographer from Kentucky, thrust into the spotlight in 1901 when, at age 24, he entered his first trance to cure his own laryngitis. Word spread, and soon in the association he founded, the Association for Research and Enlightenment, or ARE, hundreds sought his counsel. From 1925 until his death in 1945, Cayce delivered over 14,000 readings, often in that very Virginia Beach setting, with his loyal stenographer, Gladys Davis, scribbling furiously to capture every word. Yet amid the Great Depression and 2 world wars, many of these transcripts gathered dust. Why? They challenged the era's rigid views on science and faith, speaking of reincarnation, astral planes, and a consciousness unbound by the grave. Governments eyed them warily. Religious leaders decried them as heresy. So they were archived, overlooked, until now when fragments resurface like whispers from the ether. Transition slow zoom into an imagined transcript page, yellowed and cracked, with handwritten notes bleeding into the margins. Ambient hum of an old recorder fades in. At the heart of these suppressed readings lies a core revelation that Cayce uncovered in his deepest altered states. Death is no end, but a threshold to spiritual evolution. Picture him there, eyes closed, body still on a worn couch, as his subconscious voice described the soul not as a fleeting spark, but as an eternal entity cycling through lifetimes for growth. In one overlooked 1930 session, attended only by a handful of trusted seekers, Cayce revealed how the physical body acts as a mere vessel, discarded like a chrysalis when the soul ascends to review its earthly lessons. Gladys Davis, her pen flying across the page, noted his words on how consciousness persists, weaving through dimensions unseen, drawing the individual back to source for judgment, not punitive, but enlightening. This wasn't abstract philosophy. It was a map drawn from visions where Cayce wandered the halls of Akashic records, that vast cosmic library chronicling every soul's odyssey. Suppressed because it blurred the lines between mystic insight and empirical truth, these readings suggested that our daily choices ripple into eternity, demanding accountability beyond the mortal coil. Transition. Ethereal music swells, visuals shifting to abstract animations of swirling lights and fragmented memories, evoking psychological depth. Delving deeper, Cayce's perspective ignites an existential tension that gnaws at the mind. What if death strips away our illusions, forcing a raw confrontation with the self? In his trance-induced explorations, he painted consciousness as a multifaceted prism: physical, mental, spiritual, where the afterlife becomes a psychological forge. No fire and brimstone, but a profound inward journey where archetypes of the soul replay life's dramas in symbolic realms. Imagine the intrigue, a man who, in waking hours, pondered his own mortality with quiet dread, only to emerge from visions insisting that fear of death stems from our attachment to the ego's fragile shell. Cayce's revelations probe the psyche's shadows, urging us to question reality itself. Are we truly separate beings, or threads in a grand, interconnected web? His forbidden insights, pieced together from those hidden transcripts, whisper that spiritual development isn't linear, it's a spiral, ascending through trials that echo long after the heart stills. This psychological undercurrent, drawn from his personal battles with overexertion in readings that shortened his life, adds layers of human vulnerability, making his truths not distant lore, but a mirror to our own unspoken fears. Transition. Pause on a symbolic image, a locked door cracking open, light spilling forth, accompanied by a subtle, rhythmic pulse like a heartbeat slowing. Yet even in these archived depths, Cayce's visions hint at speculations untouched by his documented words. What if consciousness after death manifests as a resonant echo, a vibrational signature that replays across parallel realms, allowing the soul to commune with loved ones through subtle synchronicities in the living world? This idea, aligned with his emphasis on energetic continuity, suggests the veil is thinner than we dare believe, inviting the departed to guide us in ways that defy time's cruel arrow. Transition. Fade to a contemplative shoreline at dusk, waves lapping eternally, narrator's voice softening to a reflective hush. As I sift through these reconstructed echoes of Cayce's suppressed sessions, transcripts pieced together like a confidential dossier from Virginia Beach's guarded vaults, one truth lingers. If every soul embarks on this boundless voyage of evolution, persisting beyond the final breath, then how might embracing such hidden knowledge reshape not just our endings, but the very essence of our living days? The question hangs in the air, unanswered, pulling you deeper into the mystery.